Hey, welcome back to the Unbelievable Podcast. I am BJ Reidell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahowald, and today we are breaking down the Vikings' impending matchup with the New Orleans Saints at the Superdome in Louisiana. So that will be the majority of this podcast, taking a look position by position, side of the ball by side of the ball, and try to find some weaknesses in this Saints team, who is heavily favored, I may add, in this matchup. So that's the dominant part of the episode today. Then we'll give our picks for the postseason. We're not going to go into gambling or anything like that after a regular season that was not fruitful on our end. So we'll just do some game picks and take a look at the 4 matchups this coming weekend and have some fun with that. So that's the game plan for today. And with that said, let's do a Thursday question.
All right.
Let me pull up my document here. Last time we did this, we did Who's the Hottest Female Cartoon, so we can get rid of this one. All right, how about if you could bump into one person on the street? Doesn't matter who it is, you just would like to run into that person on the street. Who would it be?
I would assume this would mean there would be a conversation sparked with said person.
No, not necessarily. You just someone. I mean, it could end that way.
Okay. All right, I'm going to pick Tiger Woods.
Tiger Woods, why?
Because that would mean either A, he is out and about where I am.
Yeah, that's what I think. That's
or B, I am
you took the route that I wanted to go with this.
I'm in an important enough place where I'm in the same spot as Tiger Woods and I'm able to run into him. So one of the two things is happening, and either way, it's probably good for me. Yep. So I'm taking Tiger Woods.
Yeah. See, I thought about this kind of the same way you did, where it was if you're I would there's just a bunch of people that I would love to just see in street clothes,
Yeah,
just walking around
yeah.
Getting their own you bump into I don't know, Lana Del Rey at the grocery store, something funny like that, just something ridiculous. So I tried to think of someone funny. I think that I wrote this one down after Myles Garrett got punched in the face.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. By that Cleveland fan. To me, I think that I would just like to see someone like Alan Page or something like that, which I think is a good answer because
That's
Page,
realistic.
Yeah, because here's a couple of reasons. One, when I got a chance to talk to him at training camp for 30 seconds, it was awesome. I really liked the fact that I've talked to Alan Page because that guy has lived. So in one lifetime, he has became arguably the best defensive tackle of all time and a Supreme Court justice. How many lifetimes would that take you to do? Seriously. That's just completely unbelievable. So I think he's an unbelievable person, and just being in his presence, I feel like if I could get any of that greatness to rub off on me, my life would turn out all right. So I'm going with Alan Page on this one. But the thing is I bet that he does his own shopping and stuff. So you could run into Alan Page
that's realistic
at Hy-Vee
for people that live in the Twin Cities.
Yeah, I think it probably is. So those are our answers. If you guys would like to share yours with us, feel free to do so in the Daily Norseman comment section or on Twitter at unbelievable_MN. All right, let's jump into this breakdown here for this game. As Drew and I were talking about before the show, the Vikings are a heavy underdog heading into this matchup. If the media hasn't made that clear enough to you already throughout the week, they are plus 340 on the money line. That means if you bet $10, you'd win $34. So quite a big spread there overall. They're giving the Vikings 8.5 points as of this recording. So steep battle the Vikings are facing here heading down to the Superdome. Part of that is just because of the way Drew Brees played in the month of December, I think. The way that offense is kind of clicking on all cylinders.
Yeah. Plus the way the Vikings kind of limped to the finish line.
Exactly. It's not. I don't think this is a true reflection of the overall talent on both of these teams. It's just a number of different factors. I think those two playing kind of a prominent role, with the Saints very hot, the Vikings very cold, and then of course we're playing down at the Superdome this week, which is, as I said in the last show, one of the toughest places to play on the field. So let's start with Drew Brees then. As I just said, coming off of NFC Player of the Month. If you want to check out his stats for the last 4 games, it's pretty impressive. QB rating well over 100, 15 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. So he was outstanding in the month of December, and he has historically been very good in the postseason as well. So what are the Vikings staring into? I mean, we know all the standard accolades, right? A former MVP, a future Hall of Famer, holds all the major volume records for passing, And then he also, of course, owns the single-season completion records, and I believe he will end his career as the all-time passing leader in terms of completion percentage whenever that happens, too. So we've got all that on the table. But 40-year-old Drew Brees, who is he?
He's, obviously he's a stud at really everything at the quarterback position. But it's like I'm not as scared of him as I maybe should be. And I think a lot of that's because of the way Mike Zimmer has contained him since he really took over in Minnesota. I think they've matched up four times. And Drew Brees has been pretty much held in check every single time. I mean, 2014 was like the first year, which, I mean, this defense was largely different, but they went to the Superdome, and I think, the Vikings kept that one pretty low scoring. They just didn't generate any offense in that one. 2017 season opener, Monday Night Football. It took like a garbage time touchdown for them to get on the board and actually score a touchdown. I think they had a bunch of field goals in that game. Then obviously the playoff game where the first half they didn't do a darn thing. The game last season was a complete anomaly because the Saints put up 30 points, but they had like a long fumble return. They had a pick six. So the offense didn't really beat them in that game either. So looking at this matchup, like I'm not scared of the offense in terms of the Saints. I think my concern is the Vikings offense putting up points in this game. But as far as Drew Brees, Michael Thomas, and the offense, I outside of Michael Thomas, I'm not scared of any of these playmakers. Kamara's had a down year. Taysom Hill will move all over the place, and he'll be a gadget guy. That's fine. He'll get his weird package snaps. Ted Ginn can run fast. I mean, there's not a ton that I'm scared of in this offense. It's just Michael Thomas will probably get his 11 catches for 120 yards in this game. He can have that. That's fine. It's just if the Vikings can force somebody else to beat them in the key moments, I think they have a chance to contain the Saints to 20 to 24 points in this game.
Yeah, so you bring up the point about Drew Brees against the Vikings in general. So the splits that I'm looking at in front of me include not just his matchups against Mike Zimmer, but against the Vikings in general, just to see if we can get a gauge on if history's on our side. There's not a whole lot of value in these statistics, but he is 6-4 career against the Vikings. He's got a 72% completion, and he's got a split of 11 touchdowns to 3 interceptions with a passer rating of 105.8. So that's against the Vikings in his entire career. I, for whatever reason, could not find the game logs within the last 30 seconds, so I don't have anything else on there. But point being here is that he's one of the best quarterbacks of all time. We can just start there and then with Drew Brees. What makes him so successful at his current age is not necessarily his arm talent or his overall physical ability, which I think rivals Tom Brady for being one of, at this point in his career, being one of the most physically incapable players quarterbacks in terms of maneuvering the pocket and getting outside the pocket and having to run away from a pass rusher, for example. But in terms of breaking it down a defense, I mean, he's second to basically no one. Tom Brady probably has the best argument there. It's kind of just like flip a coin. I don't think anyone has a true answer to that question of who's better at breaking down a defense, but those are 1A and 1B. So Brees can beat you with his head, and when he's playing at home, as you love to point out whenever we talk about the Saints, he's historically much better playing at home than he is on the road. And I imagine a lot of that is because he can think when he's playing at the Superdome and he feels comfortable with his surroundings, which, that just makes such a big difference where the Vikings are playing this week, because I really think that if we flip this matchup and the Vikings are playing at home, Drew Brees, it wouldn't necessarily be as effective because of how much of his game at this point in his career is cerebral. So that part of his game I'm definitely afraid of, and I'm with you in that sense. Now, the thing that I'm not afraid of is that he has turned into, one, he targets Michael Thomas a lot more than he has ever targeted any individual receiver throughout his career, right? You look back in years past on all the players that he used to target, it would start with Jimmy Graham, don't get me wrong, but then just think about all the random names that they threw in there before it became
Marcus
Michael Thomas.
Colston, Devery Henderson,
Devery Henderson was the one I was thinking of. Lance Moore is another great one.
I mean,
all these guys he made great, and I think that really...
Art Meacham.
Yeah, and then he went, and then Robert Meacham left and went to San Diego. It was still San Diego at that point, so I'm right when I say that. And he just fell apart completely. Lance Moore was kind of bounced around the league as soon as he got dumped by Breeze. My point being here is that Breeze has become less of a guy who drops back and finds the most open guy, and has now become more of, and I'm not saying he's not still able to spread the field, but he has become more of a guy who drops back and looks directly at Michael Thomas. And that's not necessarily a bad thing when the guy in the receiving end is, have a Hall of Fame start to his career and is, breaking receiving records and catch percentage records and, perfect route ran records. Like anything you can think of with Michael Thomas this year, he probably shattered that in terms of fundamental talent. So that certainly helps. Now, when Breeze is not targeting Michael Thomas, the passer rating goes significantly down, right? And so this becomes a matter of, is it Breeze beating you or is it Michael Thomas beating you? And honestly, I think this is one of the few scenarios where the wide receiver has actually played a greater role in this relationship this specific year. I think Michael Thomas has elevated the talent of Breeze as opposed to Breeze elevating Michael Thomas, which he probably did earlier in Thomas's rookie season, for example. So my point that I'm kind of ramping up to here is that I think Breeze is an outstanding player, and I'm not going to take anything away from him. I'm not going to knock him whatsoever. But I think that if you eliminate Michael Thomas from the game, or at least take him out to some degree, as you stated, don't let him beat you, then I think you've got a real chance to play them well defensively, because you look at the other weapons that are on this offense for the Saints right now. And I mean, Ted Ginn is a one-trick pony. You went over that. He runs really fast. And that's honestly the best scouting report that you're going to find of Ted Ginn, because he runs a 9 route, and once in a while he runs a 7, and that's all he does. And then he can be a bubble screen guy. Okay? So that's what you got there. That's your number 2 receiver. If you want to consider Traquan Smith your number 2, I'm fine with that as well. But this is a guy who has spent the better part of the last year injured. He's not exactly a household name as it is, and really, if you didn't watch the Saints, at least a couple of games the last few years, you probably don't know who Traquan Smith is. So the next guys on the depth chart here, you got Deontay Harris, then we can include the tight ends Jared Cook and Josh Hill as well. These are the passing targets that Breeze is working with, and he certainly can make these guys better, but if you eliminate Michael Thomas from this crowd, who's the best player here? Who's the biggest playmaker? Probably Jared Cook? Mm-hmm. And are you truly afraid of Jared Cook? I don't think so. So then that brings Alvin Kamara into the equation because he's such a good receiving back. But this is they have a lot of these weapons, but if you can keep Mike Thomas to 8 catches for 60 yards, I think you feel pretty good about slowing down the rest of this offense based off of what we've seen from Alvin Kamara this year in terms of not being kind of the whole package as I think a lot of people expected coming into this year. And then the other guys that you've got are one-trick ponies, and then Traquan Smith, who's still developing. So, is it Breeze beating you, or is it Michael Thomas beating you? And if the answer here is Michael Thomas, I'm not saying that it is. That's just a theory that I'm working with here. If it's Michael Thomas and you can slow him down, this team becomes very beatable if your defense plays the way it has the last couple of weeks, which has been a bright spot for the Vikings.
Well, if the Vikings can limit Michael Thomas with one guy, then I think then you force Drew Brees to beat you with these other weapons and kind of pick apart this defense by himself, so to speak, versus, like you mentioned, zeroing in on one guy and letting him kind of – it has been, for what it's worth, clearly there's a chemistry there and there's a timing involved in throwing to a guy that much, right? 185 targets, 150 catches.
And who has the number 2 on targets on this team?
Kamara.
Yeah. Okay,
right
so these are your
Kamara.
2.
So here's the breakdown for targets and everything. So number 1 is Michael Thomas at 185 targets. This is out of 550, by the way. So that's my quick math there. It's 37% targets or something.
That's a really good guess. I'm going to double check you on that, but keep going.
That sounds about right.
That feels
185 right. Out of 559 targets. And then next is Kamara with 97 targets. And then you got Cook with 65. And the next receiver on there, so then you have Latavius Murray with 43. You have Ted Ginn with 56. So it's Michael Thomas, couple, and then it's your running back, then your tight end, then your running back, then another receiver. So it's a little bit, honestly, it reminds me of the Packers, because Rodgers will target Devontae Adams, then he'll use his running backs, and then he'll go back to his receivers. But point being here, there's a couple ways you can go about this. You can say, all right, Thomas is going to get his, and then we're going to limit everybody else. So Drew Brees absolutely has no other option besides Michael Thomas. Or you can say, all right, we're going to double Thomas on every single play and let Ted Ginn or let Jared Cook win one-on-one and have the same, or try and make Drew Brees beat you that way. Those are the two options that you have, I think, because I'm not scared of this run game. I don't think I mean, Latavius Murray is a good player. I think he's been probably more efficient, more productive this year than Kamara has. And then outside of that, you have Taysom Hill might be thrown into some weird situations. He has 6 touchdowns receiving this year.
Taysom Hill is like his own conversation in itself on this podcast.
Right, yeah. Yeah, that's. I mean,
he's like, he just doesn't like.
It's wild what he does.
He's wild, yeah. So, okay, so we've established now that it's 31% of the targets, by the way, are going to Michael Thomas. So essentially one out of every 3 dropbacks is going to Michael Thomas. All right. Now those are just targets; those aren't necessarily completions. But that you have a great as the Vikings try to figure out how to beat the Saints, you have a great idea of where the ball is going to be 33% of the time, essentially, and that's going to be in Michael Thomas's hands in some way, shape, or form. Now, then you've got Kamara, who eats up, like you said, probably another. Well, if you include his running back touches on top of his targets, he's basically another 33% or so, and the rest is the field. And now, let's talk about Taysom Hill because of the way that he is utilized within this offense, because it really, like, it's in a league of its own. Like, he's not like, there is no other player in this league that is used the same way as Taysom Hill, and I don't really think there's a couple
ways to feel about that. There's where I strongly feel, not strongly, but the majority of my feelings about Taysom Hill are, he's an athlete, and he's just a guy that's able to do these things, but I don't think it's that special. Like, you get him in there, he's just like, how, for example, Jerick McKinnon played quarterback in college, kind of at Georgia Southern, but it was a triple option thing.
Right.
He was an athlete. They switched him to running back. Like, say Taysom Hill is basically that, but he's being kept as the quarterback label. But he's really just like a special teams running back, and then he can come in and he gets a few snaps. He does his little gadget plays. It's not like he's an elite talent at, receiver. Like, it's not like he's unguardable at receiver running routes. It's not like he's untackleable as a running back. It's not like he, as a quarterback, has the unbelievable arm talent where you can't stop him. He's a third string quarterback for a reason. So he's just a guy that gets some extra attention or some extra publicity because he still wears a quarterback number and he still is listed as a quarterback, but he just plays good on special teams and is a good enough athlete to get the ball sometimes on an offense that doesn't have really any weapons besides Michael Thomas.
That's probably pretty fair, because I think that you could put a lot of, just to add on to your point here, you could put a lot of guys that are starters in this league into Taysom Hill's role, and they probably do it as well, if not better.
Yeah, I mean, what he does is unique and it's cool because guys listed at quarterback don't do that. But
right.
he's not dangerous to the Vikings to me. Like, if he's on the field, he's just another guy that could get the ball. He's just like Ted Ginn, where he could get the ball on this play.
See, I agree with you in that sense, but the only thing is that it's kind of a dead giveaway when he's on the field that he's going to be involved in some capacity. Because he's not on the field for every single offensive play. So when he is on the field, you can bet one of two things, and this really doesn't narrow it down or help you at all from an analytical standpoint, but he's either going to be the guy getting the ball, or he's going to be involved in the kind of the illusion that the Saints create so that defenders flow to Taysom Hill in order to get someone else wide open. So, of course, that's what any player does throughout a game when they're either being targeted or quote,
well,
not
it's the gadget thing. That was the issue I had with Cordero Patterson,
right?
As a Viking, because he couldn't run routes when he was brought on the field. You knew some sort of gadget play was coming up.
That's what Taysom Hill is, but it works for the Saints for some reason, and I think
it does. It does.
It doesn't make sense because every single time Taysom Hill does anything, there's the swarm of the Twitter feed is hilarious because there's the people who are like, why does Sean Payton keep doing this? Like, they just, like, the whole, like, Sean Payton just needs to, like, feed his ego by getting Taysom Hill involved so he can continue to be this offensive mastermind, which, for what it's worth, probably kind of a fair, like, weird take there, like, kind of possible, because we've seen how Sean Payton is and how much he enjoys being kind of a wonder. Well, he's not really a wonder kid anymore because he's older, but being one of the best offensive minds in the league, he certainly appreciates that title. So there is that element to it. And then there's the people who are like, my God, this guy is a Swiss Army knife. And he is, because he can make tackles and throw the ball. But that's basically all that Taysom Hill is. What makes this offense great as a whole, though, and really this has been kind of a staple throughout the career of Drew Brees, he's always had a very solid, if not great, if not elite offensive line to protect for him. Mm-hmm. The Saints have done a tremendous job throughout his entire career. It doesn't matter. Basically, since he walked in the door in New Orleans, he has gotten excellent protection. And this year is really nothing different. They have done just an unbelievable job scouting offensive linemen, for the better part of the last decade. And this group that they have in there now is really as good of a unit as they've ever had. And that starts with Teron Armstead on the left side, who I'm sure you are aware of his name because of the number of Pro Bowls that he has been in, and just the overall, when you think of offensive tackles, Teron Armstead tends to fall in that top 10 range most years. Then you've got Ryan Ramczyk, who has been arguably one of the best offensive linemen, period, this year. He's on the right side. We're all very familiar with him as Vikings fans because I'm sure a lot of you took a look at him coming out of Wisconsin as a prospect. And he's been outstanding since he got to the NFL. You got the three guys on the inside. Andrews Pete, who kicked inside, I believe, the year that they drafted Ryan Ramczyk. He is a former offensive tackle. He's had an okay switch to the guard position, in my opinion. He's not as good as he was on the outside relative to the interior, but he's still a solid player. You got Eric McCoy at the center position. I believe he's a rookie, and he's been a very solid one at that. And then you've got Larry Warford, that has been a staple in the NFL for many years, kind of bounced around a couple of different teams, and he might be having his best year to date. So that's your front five, and that's what allows Drew Brees to be, have concrete feet in the pocket because he has such good protection. Now, there isn't really a definitive weakness on this line either. You just, the simple answer here is the Vikings are going to need to find a way to get pressure, because if you give Drew Brees more than 3 seconds in the pocket, good luck. The Vikings will lose this game. Doesn't matter what, it doesn't matter, period. If he gets more than 3 seconds consistently, he's going to break you down with his mind, and Sean Payton will call the right plays more often than not to put the Vikings defense in a bad position, and Drew Brees is going to find the right guy if you give him too much time. Just game, set, match. That's just how it's going to work if the Vikings aren't able to get pressure. Now, if there is a weakness, it's maybe the fact that Ryan Ramczyk is in his, second year in the league?
Mm-hmm.
And
Third year,
okay. Yeah. And then you've got Teron Armstead, who has been in and out with injuries the last couple of years, so there might be some sort of way to maneuver around them when you're staring down Danielle Hunter, who's, arguably one of the best edge rushers in the NFL right now. He doesn't get the publicity for it, but he's right up there with a lot of these guys that are coming off the edge. And Everson Griffin is just wild, and I always trust him in a playoff matchup because he doesn't need any help to get up for this type of game. He's going to be nuts, and I expect him to have a solid performance. So I like that matchup with Armstead. I think that's one to watch and one that could really make a difference in this game, because if you get to Brees on the blind side, I think that he becomes a bit of a different quarterback because he can't sit back there and feel comfortable. And that can be said about a lot of quarterbacks, but when you're dealing with a quarterback who isn't very mobile in the pocket, it becomes that much more important if you hit him early.
Yeah, I think that was the difference in that playoff game, in that first half. Everson Griffin got after Drew Brees quite a bit. Danielle Hunter got after Drew Brees quite a bit. He made a couple mistakes early on, and it was that's how the Vikings got out to a 17-0 lead in that game. So I do think there is a little bit about Drew Brees that if you can get to him, you can speed him up a little bit. But it seems like, when you watch him, especially at the Superdome, it seems like that offensive line does play a lot better, and he's able to be way more comfortable than he would be on the road in a hostile environment. So I think the Saints have that advantage on their side. But Danielle Hunter, Everson Griffin, again, that's one of the best pass rushing duos in football. And, we've talked about every single show, it's not about necessarily getting the sacks. It's not about, making sure you get those sack totals up to 10 in the game or whatever. It's about getting to Drew Brees and rallying him just a little bit and maybe forcing that mistake, maybe forcing that interception, whatever it is. And so I think the Vikings, to that end, they always have an advantage against the other team, the opposition, because of the Griffin-Hunter duo. Griffin didn't put up the sack numbers necessarily that you'd expect from somebody that I'm talking pretty highly about, but it's about the pressure, it's about the hurries, I guess, on the quarterback, and that duo is every single week they're rushing quarterbacks a little bit more than they're used to. So from that aspect, I do think Breeze will be hurried a little bit more than he's maybe used to, and I think the Vikings will. From that perspective, they'll be able to contain this offense, and they won't be putting up like the 40 points that they have in a few games this year. I think it'll be relatively low scoring. Again, we'll talk about the Vikings offense. I think that's where my concern lies for the most part.
Yeah, certainly after that Green Bay game, it's fair to have that concern heading into this matchup here. So let's finish up here with the offense real quick. I just want to point out that I think that the biggest weakness offensively for this Saints team is that if you force them to run between the tackles, I just don't trust Kamara being able to do that. He's just much better as an outside rusher. So if you see Latavius Murray get into the game repeatedly, I feel pretty confident in saying that those are going to be plays that are going to be made with inside the tackles as opposed to Kamara where they like to get him to the edge. So to me, it's all predicates on this passing game, which unfortunately is the biggest weakness of probably this entire Vikings team, is that they're going to try to consistently pass the ball, move it downfield, and run gadget plays with Kamara and Taysom Hill as well. Michael Thomas also catches bubble screens from every now and then. Ted Ginn can be used kind of in interesting ways, I suppose. So there's a lot of different things that are going to run through this passing game, but I don't see the rushing attack for the Saints being a true threat. I just don't think that Kamara is truly he's not your he's a new age running back. He's more like the goal of him playing running back for you is just to find different ways to get the ball in his hands as opposed to just handing it to him and let him run downhill. He's not Derrick Henry. He's much closer to Aaron Jones. And for that reason, if you could slow him down in the passing game, you take a whole dimension out of this offense because of how they like to use the running backs passing the football. So the defensive backs are going to be tested for the Vikings all game. I think we're all aware of that. But ultimately what this comes down to for me is that if you can keep Michael Thomas basically under 75 yards, you're putting the Saints in a different position. That's a huge win.
Under 10 catches, under 100 yards would be a huge win just because of how often he's targeted. He's going to get 15 targets in this game.
And that's probably
especially if it's still competitive for 4 quarters. That's just the way it is. He's going to get that many targets, and because of that, he's going to put up numbers. It's just limiting how many yards he gets on those targets. Tackling after the catch, all that good stuff. But then also, I guess for me, it's the 3rd and 8. On 3rd and 8, can you make someone else beat you? On it's if there's a key drive in the 4th quarter where Vikings are miraculously leading by 3 points. In there, maybe the Saints have one final drive to go get a field goal or something. Can you make someone else beat you instead of Michael Thomas? If they can, I think they'll have a chance. But again, they'll have to score points first to be in that situation.
Absolutely. All right, let's get over to the Saints defense here. The defensive line is chucked with one really talented guy and then 3 other guys on this team. That's kind of how that defensive line looks, to be honest with you. And the really talented one is also the loudest one. He's been hilarious all week, and that's Cameron Jordan. He's going to come off the edge. He's one of the most dominant pass rushers over the last, probably 4 or 5 years or so with Cameron Jordan. He's been running his mouth all week, and if you haven't been paying attention, it's been a lot of fun, really. It's like he's taking those subtle jabs that are offending people who are easily offended, but everyone else can kind of have some fun with it, And he made fun of the Vikings for, quote, being on their 5th quarterback since the last time these two teams played. And I think that he's in general, he's got a very fun personality. He just happens to be the guy this week that the Vikings are trying to turn into, the latest edition of what was it, Zach? I don't even remember his name. Zach Brown, trying to turn him into the latest Zach Brown.
That's right, because that was the Eagles game where he called out Kirk for not being very good, or took a shot at Kirk Cousins for something, and of course the story goes that Kirk lit up the Eagles and Zach Brown was cut. Now I don't believe
that would never happen here.
Cameron Jordan's not getting cut, so that's not necessarily going to be the narrative here. But you're right about the whole people that get offended easily are offended by this because he's not saying anything false. I mean, obviously he's not literally meaning that there's been 5 quarterbacks.
He's making it. He's dramatized.
And the divisional round match or the Minneapolis Miracle, but he's just saying the Vikings have. I mean, it's true. The past 10 years they've been going through quarterbacks rather at a rapid rate. While
he's making the same joke that you probably have drunk at a bar about the Vikings quarterback situation before.
And now people, Kirk had a pretty solid season. Oh, well, now, if you make fun of this guy, you can't do that. And so, I don't know. I mean, some might play into the narrative that, or might kind of think it's legitimate, like, he's turning on pissed off Kirk now because we've seen like twice now, maybe ever in his career, like when he's mad, he plays well. So now this is a thing that just happens all the time. Is that when Kirk Cousins is mad, he plays well. I don't know if I buy that, but I like Cameron Jordan. He seems like a cool guy to hang out with, and I like he and Teddy are kind of why the Saints team is cool. After that, I don't really know if I like Sean Payton or any of those guys, but I don't know.
Yeah. All right. So the rest of this defensive line, you got Shy Tuttle on there.
Good name.
Keeping in mind, by the way, that they are missing a couple of key pieces on their defensive line. Sheldon Rankins and Marcus Davenport are both on injured reserve. So the Vikings dodge a bullet in that facet. You look at the defense. You look at the linebackers then on the second level of this defense. Demario Davis is having one of the best years period for a linebacker right now. If you're interested in his PFF grade, it's 90.1. That puts him in the blue stripe. So on PFF, that signifies an elite defender. And from what I have seen from Demario Davis, that grade reflects the eye test, if you will. So he's been outstanding all year long. They've also got Kiko Alonso, who has bounced around the league. I think he started his career in Buffalo, went down to Miami, and now he is on the Saints via trade. And then you've got a couple other guys, Craig Robinson and A.J. Klein. But the two big names there, to me, Demario Davis and Kiko Alonso are going to be the names that kind of jump off the. You'll hear the announcer call those two names far more frequently than A.J. Klein or Manti Te'o or Craig Robinson or anyone else for that matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I think A.J. Klein had that pick six. I mean, the Panthers are handing out pick sixes left and right all season, so that's not necessarily anything to be too proud of. But I mean, yeah, you're right about Davis, and this linebacker group's not super special, but. I think as a whole, they're a unit that's playing really well together, and this defense combined with the Vikings' lack of offensive production for, a few weeks now, to me it signifies a potential tough matchup here. These guys are talented, and the secondary's got a bunch of talent too. So I know you'll kind of run through the names on those guys, but we like to make fun of Marcus Williams for the memes and whatnot, but he's actually a stud player.
He's been very, very good this year.
He's been very, very good.
It's funny because every time he's the one who gets caught, like, kind of with his pants down, like, he's good every other play except for when he's on national television.
Yeah.
Seriously.
And it's a type of thing, too, now where because of that play, like, every time he does get beat or every time he does miss an assignment, whatever it is.
I feel bad for the guy.
It's going to be magnified. Oh, yeah.
Because he definitely blew it on that miracle play. Don't get me wrong, he missed the tackle, but like that really shouldn't define. Like he's done a really nice job not allowing that moment to define his career.
That was his rookie season. He was tremendous that season.
And
that play.
And he's really only gotten better. I mean, this guy is going to get paid big bucks. It's going to happen sooner or later with the way he's played. It's just we all remember him for that moment, and Vikings fans especially. And I don't blame you for remembering that moment because that moment was fantastic, and we should talk about it as much as possible on Sunday. So, looking at the rest of this Saints secondary here, you've got the new guy, the import from the Giants, who dropped let's call it a slur, I suppose, on Twitter. I said the R word, Janoris Jenkins I'm speaking of, and he was released from the Giants shortly after and picked up by the Saints because the Saints don't care. And they also have Marshawn Lattimore from Ohio State, a former first-round pick. He's one of the best cornerbacks in the entire league, period. He's your number one guy. He's your shutdown corner that will be, I imagine, will be shadowing Stephon Diggs around on Sunday.
He's the last couple times they've matched up, he's traveled with Thielen for what it's worth.
Okay.
I know in the playoff game, the Miracle game, he was traveling with Thielen. And last year, this is right after Thielen had, I think it was during his streak of 100-yard games. Lattimore traveled with Thielen. For what it's worth, Thielen did put up 100 yards in that game as well, but a lot of that was in garbage time.
Absolutely. And then you round out the list of this cornerbacks with two guys, Eli Apple, who his mom is louder than his game, and he has not been very successful. The Vikings historically have toasted him, whether he's on the Giants or the Saints, it doesn't matter which. And then P.J. Williams, who I believe it was the last time these two teams matched up with each other, actually won Defensive Player of the Week after getting roasted for an entire half, but had a big pick six late in the game.
Yes.
And that's
exactly what happened. No, the pick six, if you remember, was Diggs unfortunately stopped on his little crossing route at the absolute worst time, because that was right as Kirk was in his motion to release the ball. PJ Williams did not stop running and actually caught the ball in stride and then took it to the house. So it's one of those really lucky pick sixes that he probably didn't deserve, but yet he got the Defensive Player of the Week anyway for it.
And then we get to the safeties. Marcus Williams, who we just elaborated on, outstanding player, just a couple of not awesome moments for him. And then Von Bell out of Ohio State. He's a former, I want to say he's a second-round pick, but I believe he definitely had first-round talent, because I remember really liking his play coming out of Ohio State. And then you've also got DJ Swearinger, who's on the team, but he's not much of a factor. And then Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who I believe last week I saw show up on Red Zone because he had an interception. He's another factor within this secondary. So I think everybody
intercepted the Panthers last week.
That's true. So you look at this group as a whole. There's a lot of huge names. Janoris Jenkins being one of the best players at his position a couple of years ago. So a lot of people remember him in that way. You got Marshawn Lattimore, as I said, as a first-round pick, just comes in with inherent kind of bias towards him. Apple being another first-round pick, honestly. And then you got P.J. Williams, who I believe was a second-round pick coming out of Florida State. There's just a lot of there's more bark than bite with the secondary, I think. But there is also, don't get me wrong here, I'm not trying to take too much away, because there is a lot of talent here. And it starts with Lattimore and Williams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's something to be said about the point you're making, in that there's a ton of name power.
Yes,
that's
what I'm saying.
Necessarily I know what you're saying. These guys, it means, for example, Eli Apple hasn't really lived up to first round.
But everybody knows his name because he was at Ohio State and because he came out as a first round pick.
Yes.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying. But my concern with this matchup is just so. I'm just looking at the Vikings and their games. When was the last time they truly lit up an opponent, right? I mean, that Chargers game was a lot of the turnovers created by Phillip Rivers, short fields, and a lot of field goals too in that game. For what it's worth, it was a lot of they couldn't punch in the end zone. That Lions game was blah. The Seattle game, you got some garbage time comeback playing against a soft defense. This unit has not truly lit up a defense since really the second half of that Broncos game, right? Something like that is probably the last time that we've seen this team kind of really gel. And I mean, we're going on, a third of the season at this point where they haven't really played. That middle part of the season was great. They were lighting up every opponent they played. It was really when Thielen was out, and since he's returned, there hasn't been that big time performance yet. Now, maybe it happens this week, maybe it doesn't. I don't know, but something isn't quite there since midseason, and their hope to winning this week is that they find whatever that was. And
does this correlate at all with Dalvin Cook's shoulder?
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe a little bit.
Maybe. I guess I don't know how badly the shoulder injury is.
Because it started in Denver, right?
It started in the second half of that game.
Okay.
I mean, it maybe.
I'm just curious how big of a factor he is this week.
Part of me believes, I think I've told this or said this to you on the show, but I don't think his presence is as big of a deal as it I'm maybe would suggest. Now I maybe would get burned for that take after watching the Vikings offense against the Packers with Mike Boone leading the way. But I think this offense, when it's at its best, is very much predicated on starting with the play action pass, starting with the pass to set up the run for later in the game. So right. I think that this team should be, and as at its best when it's pass first, which is why I'm not super bummed or oh my God, Dalvin Cook has to have the best game of his life for the Vikings to win. I don't think that's exactly what it is at all. And I don't know. I think play action works with any running back, not necessarily just Dalvin. Is I guess what I'm saying.
Any running back that's a threat, and I think Dalvin Cook definitely falls under that umbrella. So, quick rundown of this defense one more time. The big playmakers here: Cameron Jordan off the edge. He's the superstar. He's the loudmouth. He's funny. He's honestly, he's a really good guy. I mean, I know Vikings fans are going to hate him this week, but
I think he's the Saints Man of the Year nominee, and he has been a couple times now.
Yeah,
so
he's an outstanding human being, and he's just a lot of fun. So I wouldn't just don't take any of that. Don't be the person that takes that too seriously. Okay, if
you listen, be the person that gets offended that because your quarterback had a pretty good season, that someone else wants to poke fun at the organization for going through quarterbacks like dryer sheets for like a decade.
Yeah. All right, so Cameron Jordan's out coming off the edge. Watch out for him. You got the linebacker, Demario Davis, who's been outstanding sideline to sideline, a great tackler. Not necessarily a guy that's going to impact in terms of sacks or big statistics that we love to talk about, but someone that will make big plays throughout the game on the field in terms of creating tackles and minimizing big plays. And then on the back end, keep an eye on Marshawn Lattimore, who... because of the way Thielen has played the last few weeks coming off of injury, I'm curious to see if, in fact, he does shadow Thielen again. But there's history says he'll shadow Thielen. My guess is that he'll shadow Stephon Diggs. And then Marcus Williams, he is as good of a ball hawk as you're going to find in this league at free safety. So those are the big names here. I'm going to ask you this question coming off of that. Whose success this week is more important to the Vikings capitalizing against this defense, Dalvin Cook or Adam Thielen?
Adam Thielen, to me.
And why is that?
I mean, again, I really think this offense should be and is pass first when at its best. And I think having the viable other threat besides Diggs. Now, Diggs is going to be your deep threat, probably the guy that's going to take the top off the defense a time or two, or hopefully a time or two in this game, take that shot down the field. Thielen's zero catch performance against the Packers, for whatever reason, he wasn't targeted. I think there's a lot of things involved there, but
sure,
he didn't have a catch in that game, and I think that had a bigger impact than Dalvin not playing. So I think you get both those guys involved. You really can't double one because you'll leave one single covered. If you can get those guys involved where they get half the targets or something like that, I think the Vikings passing game can get back to kind of that midseason form, or I guess better than that really, because they didn't have Thielen for that stretch of the season. So I think that's where they should start things, is get after the Saints right away with play action, take those shots deeper down the field, and then once they've kind of got a rhythm there, that's when I think Dalvin will be able to really take apart that defense and these linebackers. But I'm on the page, kind of on the belief that you get Thielen and Diggs involved early and often, and from there is when you kind of start to sprinkle in Dalvin Cook.
So I'm with you. I think that Adam Thielen is more important for somewhat of a separate reason. I just think that if the Vikings are going to win this game, they have to win a shootout. This is the type of game that you go out, like, this is why you paid for Kirk Cousins. I don't mean to put more pressure on his shoulders because this is a little bit unrealistic, I think, for Vikings fans to expect him to win this game. I still think that, obviously, you're hoping to win this game, but to me, this isn't an expectation game because of the situation that the Vikings are facing. As I said a million times, it's a bit of an uphill battle. But this is the type of game that, this is why you have Kirk Cousins, to try to out-duel Drew Brees. I'm not saying it's it's possible, but this is why you pay him that money. And so that, to me, that's this game. If the Vikings are going to win, it's going to end 35-31 or something like that. This isn't going to be a 17-14 defensive battle. If the Vikings are going to win this game, Adam Thielen needs to be involved. And the Vikings need to be able to throw the ball efficiently downfield. And, if they can run the ball too, don't get me wrong, that's nice. But I just don't think that Dalvin Cook's role is as important in terms of, he might be important in terms of creating yards and opportunities, but the guys who are going to be getting the yards, I think, if the Vikings are to win, are Diggs and Thielen. You got to take advantage of those matchups. If you're if Marshawn Lattimore is having a good day and you just want to stay away from him, I feel pretty confident with, Eli Apple. You can target him with whoever you want, and PJ Williams really the same. And I get that he burned the Vikings the last time, but, if you can, you can try to get away from the big playmakers on this defensive backfield for the Saints. And that, to me, starts with Adam Thielen. So, that'll kind of bleed us into our game predictions for the week. We'll start here with Minnesota and New Orleans. We've given you all the information. You guys know what Vegas says. So you know what the national media thinks. Are you kind of on the same page that the Vikings will ultimately lose this weekend?
I am. I'm not going to – I think it would be insane to expect the Vikings to win this game. I think you mentioned that already. I'm going to go – I think the Saints win by about 10. I think they can keep it competitive for 2 or 3 quarters, but I think just in that environment, it's a top 3 tough stadium to play in the NFL.
Right.
And you have, while we harped on their weapons or lack of for a long time, besides Michael Thomas and Kamara, Breeze and Thomas have the best probably rapport between QB and receiver in the NFL. Their timing is impeccable on those timing routes, and I think that's a large reason of the numbers that Thomas has put up. So I think it's going to be something like 27-17. Like, I think it's going to take a remarkable performance from Kirk. But here's the thing: we're going to know in the first 6 minutes of the game what type of performance we're going to get from Kirk, because if he gets rattled early on in the game, it's Kirk. It's over. The Vikings offense just won't click. But if he can kind of get in a rhythm right away, give him a couple screen passes maybe, or a play action shot down the field, I think the Vikings will have a chance. But I'm just not confident based on what I've seen the last few games from this offense.
Absolutely. I unfortunately am taking the Saints as well. I've got, if I was betting, which I really should not be, I would be taking the Saints spread here to cover. I expect the Saints to cover their spread, and that's what I say at the top, 8.5 right now. I would take the Saints right now because I think that ultimately the Saints offense, we did point out the weaknesses. They do exist, and they exist on every single team. But the Saints cover up their own weaknesses better than
Sean Payton's really good.
He's really good. Any offensive weakness that they have, whether it's in terms of not enough quality personnel, Drew Brees has been able to cover up. And as he's kind of aged into the late stages of his career, the offensive scheme has adapted to his style of play, and they've gotten playmakers around him that can hit the big play. You look at kind of the thing that's similar, that's kind of consistent among all these offensive playmakers, is pretty much every single one of them, if nothing else, they are a threat to hit the big play.
Yeah, they're a home run threat.
Taysom Hill, Ted Ginn, Traquan Smith, Deontay Harris,
Jared Cook,
all of those guys are threats to hit the big play, and then you've got the consistent factors in Kamara and Thomas. I just think that's too much for this Vikings defense right now. I don't think the Vikings offense can keep up with them.
I don't trust Xavier Rhodes or Trey Waynes to stop Ted Ginn. It's probably going to come down to a scenario at some point in this game, whether it's early on or later in the game, where there's a 3rd and 9, and you have one-on-one Ted Ginn versus Trey Waynes, or Ted Ginn versus Xavier Rhodes. Do you expect those guys to win that? 2 years ago, you would have said absolutely, but I don't know if that's the case now. I think I tweeted this earlier this week. There are 2 likely outcomes for this game. One, Vikings just get blown out, because these are how playoff losses go.
And that's kind of how I see it happening.
Either they're a blowout, or the other number 2. Vikings outplay the Saints for majority of the game and then lose in epic fashion. One of those is going to happen. The third likelihood of them winning is pretty far down the list of likelihoods to me. So those are the 2 to look forward to if you're a Vikings fan. It's going to be great.
This would be a big, big upset relative to Vegas odds if the Vikings were able to pull off this playoff game.
Essentially, Vegas is saying they'll have 1 in 4 chance, more or less.
Yeah.
So
Vikings have a 5.6% chance to appear in the Super Bowl, according to ESPN odds. So just keep that in mind. This opening game obviously weighs a ton on that figure. So that rounds out our Vikings analysis for the week, and we'll quick run through the rest of these postseason games and give a little snippet for you, and then we'll be done here. So Buffalo and Houston, they have the first postseason game. It's a matchup between Josh Allen and Deshaun Watson. One of my favorite non-Vikings teams in the Houston Texans. J.J. Watt returns to the field. Watson has been up and down this entire season. Still a very, very good quarterback, but he has had some very soft weeks, and generally those soft weeks are coming against great defenses, which is what Buffalo is trotting out behind its very erratic running back of a quarterback that they have there.
Yeah, I'm taking Houston because I like their quarterback better.
And they're playing at home as well.
But I do think it's possible that both quarterbacks just play really poorly, and Houston wins 16-9 or something like that.
The thing is, though, is that if Josh Allen plays poorly, Buffalo doesn't have, there's no one to catch him offensively. If Josh Allen isn't on his game, if he's turning the ball over consistently, or if he's just straight up airmailing wide receivers, which is he does have a tendency to do. He's one of the most talented quarterbacks in the league right now, but he doesn't really know how to rein in that arm quite yet. And if he comes up small, Devin Singletary's not going to beat you. I'm sorry. Right. He's a solid running back. Frank Gore, Frank Gore is on Buffalo still. Okay, those guys aren't going to beat you. And John Brown, for as prolific of as a season as he has had relative to his contract, he's not going to beat you single-handedly. Okay? So ultimately it comes down to the fact that I think that Houston has a better roster construction right now. And like you said, they got the more consistent, better signal caller playing at home. Give me Houston as well. Next one on tap, Tennessee and New England. What is it, the first time in a decade that New England is playing on Wild Card Weekend?
Yeah.
They do draw a home matchup, so it's Belichick against Mike Vrabel, a former linebacker and hilarious red zone threat in the earlier Belichick era, I suppose. Belichick's coming off a loss to a former disciple of his last week in Brian Flores, so that can lend some credibility, I suppose. And there's just not that much statistics on New England playing on Wild Card Weekend in general, so I don't know. Tennessee's been playing really well. Ryan Tannehill has been arguably the best quarterback over the last 6 or so weeks. I believe he was AFC Player of the Week, month for December. And then you've got the rushing king, which I don't think enough people know about yet because he's such kind of a quiet player. But Derrick Henry finished with over 1,500 rushing yards. And these receivers, A.J. Brown is breaking out in a big way, strong candidate for Offensive Rookie of the Year. And then you've also got Corey Davis, who has been kind of figuring out a little bit with more consistent quarterback play. You got Jonnu Smith, who's a bit of a wild card at tight end. So some interesting factors here for Tennessee. They have to go to Foxborough, which just inherently is dread for most organizations. But the way that Tennessee's playing and the way that New England's playing, does Tennessee actually have a shot here?
They do, and they're going to win this game.
Oh, all right.
And they're going to win the game. They're like it's a lot of this is about how New England has struggled with like good teams for the most part all year, right? I mean, even Dallas, obviously the weather was kind of a factor in that one, but Dallas nearly beat them at their place, and I think Tennessee is far superior to Dallas. And Tannehill's playing really, really efficiently. Obviously, Derrick Henry is tough to bring down,
impossible,
and nearly impossible. And I think this defense, especially in the front seven, is sneaky good for Tennessee. So, and
Jarrell Casey,
nothing about the New England offense scares me. So I think Tennessee wins this game, and I think to me, I think a lot of people are going to be surprised by it, but Tennessee is a really good 9-7 team, I think.
Yeah, they are. I mean, they're a different.
They were 4-5, I believe, or something like that, and then Tannehill really turned it on, and since they've been just dangerous. Yeah,
it's literally, this team is night and day from when Marcus Mariota started the season versus where they are now with Ryan Tannehill. I mean, they should franchise tag him, but I'm not gonna, when he gets paid a pretty nice deal at the end of the season, he will have earned it, even if he doesn't play well against New England. I'm going with New England in this one. I'm just betting on the king. I don't bet against New England. I don't bet against Tom Brady, especially when they're playing at home. Give me the inherent victor here. Versus, I believe Tennessee's been in the playoffs, once or twice in the last 5 or 6 years. I'll take the guy.
They've went 9-7 4 straight years. Fun fact for the Tennessee Titans.
There you go. So, all right. So Drew's got Tennessee. I've got New England. And the last one here, the Sunday night matchup following the Vikings game. Seattle heads to Philadelphia. So Carson Wentz will be carrying Greg Ward, Dallas Goedert, a hobbled Zach Ertz, a broken down offensive line, and some very, very suspect defensive players home with him to Philadelphia to face off against Seattle. This is like the injury bowl, who has no running backs except for now Marshawn Lynch is there, and you've got, Travis Homer is the other running back in Seattle. Tyler Lockett, who has been inconsistent and ineffective the last several weeks. It's basically been the Russell Wilson show. So I think you can make an argument that these two teams, their quarterbacks, kind of are they did more for.
They're not winning their next playoff game. Is what it comes down to.
But these two quarterbacks have done more for their team than basically any other quarterback not named Lamar Jackson in the NFL this year.
Yeah, especially the last month. Wentz has been a stud. Yeah. The last month or so. But I'm going to take Seattle, and I think it's just because I think Wilson is going to ultimately make that one extra play. That I don't think Wentz will make. But really, I think it's going to come down to those two guys because neither of these rosters right now, as an active roster, are very good.
Yeah. Philadelphia just doesn't have much left. Their secondary includes Marcus Epps. Do you guys remember who Marcus Epps is, by the way? I don't think you do because we talked about him in training camp for the Vikings. He's on the practice squad. He is included in that rotation in their secondary.
They could probably use Anderson Dahill right now.
They probably could. They could use a lot of guys right now. They have nothing left. So I'm picking Seattle as well, and I'm picking it strictly on the fact that they have nothing left. There's nothing there in Philadelphia. Like, they're not going anywhere in the postseason. It may as well start in Seattle.
This team beat out Dallas.
How embarrassing.
It's bad. That's
Jason Garrett is still employed as of this recording, by the way. Just, it's something. It's something down there. If I was a Cowboys fan right now, I would be livid. I would be very, very unhappy. So, it's always good when we end the show dogging on Dallas, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, that's my favorite.
Yeah. All right, folks. Thanks for listening. As always, you can find us on the Daily Norseman. Leave us a comment if you like in the comment section below. Subscribe to us on iTunes. If you want to watch this show, we are available on YouTube. Every single episode is, with the exception of a few earlier ones when I had some recording issues. And make sure you follow the Climb in the Pocket network in general. If you don't like Drew and I, there's probably someone that you will enjoy listening to. So, as always, Skol Vikes, and we will catch you guys next week.